All right, so we have 3 slides with bullet points on sort of different aspects of what's covered in the document. And so, you know, I'm not going to read, you know, every bullet point on it, but I'm cognizant of the fact that when I've seen this presented before, we didn't get to the last slide, and the last slide is really important. So if we end up moving past a slide, we'll circle back to it, you know, time permitting. And can you guys see? It's really hard if you're on the edges here. There's no screen in the front, so if you see them looking wistfully over their shoulders. So the first aspect that we really wanted to talk about are issues that concern access and discovery. I mean, if there's a particular part of this that one of you guys want to address, jump up, you know, use your outside voice.
Has anybody ever seen this document, this advocacy document before today?
October has, of course.
And we have a link at the end. It's a shortened link to take you there as well, so that you can look at it after the fact as well. But the idea behind these slides was to represent all of their statements, of course, separated into broader categories, so that you could actually read it. The first time we did it, we tried to put everything onto one screen. It wasn't very successful. Even as being as close up as I was.
So for the librarians in the room, what issues have you experienced with your patrons around access and discovery? What are the pain points, the contentious? Anybody willing to? Everything is easy. Nobody has any pain points. Yes.
I would say that I have one example. So I would stress exactly that partnering with the companies that provide discovery layers is very important. We subscribed, so we have a WorldCat Local right now as our discovery layer, and we've been using the OCLC knowledge base to help identify the electronic content we have, which then in turn becomes the access point in the discovery layer. We're no longer loading MARC records for ebooks into an ILS system. We're turning them on in the knowledge base and setting holdings in OCLC and making them discoverable that way. A few years ago, we did subscribe to an eBrary, I think, academic ebook collection, and we had that subscription for a year. For the first half of the year, we weren't able to turn it on in our knowledge base and make it discoverable in our discovery layer, and I think because of that, the usage was really low. And so when it came to the end of the year and we were having to make hard decisions about cutting things because that was part of our subscription budget, and our subscription budget, as librarians know, tend to stay flat or go down, and the cost of the subscriptions are going up, 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 and so every year it's just making more and more hard decisions. Because our use was so low, and I do think it had to do with that first 6 months not having it discoverable within our discovery layer, we did end up cutting that as a collection. But into that time period, like 6 months into that time period, ProQuest, or I don't even remember if it was part of ProQuest at that time or not, but it was a while back, worked with OCLC to make that collection available in the OCLC knowledge base. And so we always advocate whenever we talk to publishers, when we talk to OCLC, about partnering with different publishers to get that content into the knowledge base so that we can make it accessible. I think having MARC record sets is great, but I think as we move forward in time, that's going to be less important in some ways, as libraries are starting to use their knowledge bases to provide access to their collections. It tends to be, in general, a simpler, much more streamlined workflow. You don't have to be constantly loading record sets if the content's changing over time. So from a library perspective, that is important, and other librarians in the room might want to comment on that as well.
Anybody do it differently than Katie described? over here.
Sure. Schultz over Insight. So maybe you won't have an answer to my question. It's somewhat more economic related. So with the change in sort of print collections, decrease in sort of print holding, has that changed the economics with which you sort of govern your acquisition? So what I mean is, so since there's fewer print holdings, maybe you have more space, you're not spending as much on sort of storage and sort of other pieces, but has increased costs on the side of, let's say, technical infrastructure and sort of all the support capabilities that you need for managing all of this. How has that changed? And then has that influenced the sort of the idea behind this document? Because I see a lot of this is cost-related issues. So are you coming at it from a standpoint of you can't afford ebooks now because print's gone away, but now you're sitting in a situation where the future realities of ebook have changed on you? So what are the driving forces that are essentially going on here?
So kind of at that last, I'll comment on kind of that last idea that you had there about not being able to afford ebook collections. I would say we don't feel that in order to support our community in the way we currently can, especially relying heavily on other libraries' collections, that we don't have the resources financially to acquire all of the content that we currently are getting and able to access through other libraries' collections. So our library budget is definitely, and not even because our print collections are shrinking, primarily because of serials. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have. But overall, and other people from educational institutions can comment too about, and probably all of you publishers as well. I mean, the economy is not at its highest height right now. We're still seeing hardships economically at our institution. I'm guessing at most everyone else's institution, flat budgets or decreasing budgets. Our print, we are not purchasing as much print, it's true. We aren't replacing that necessarily with electronic book content. Some of that leftover money is going to help support our serials collections, quite honestly. We get a lot of demand from our community for more and more journal collections. Even our English department, who normally we would think would be one of our biggest advocates for purchasing books to add to the collections, are saying we don't want to buy any more books. All we want are journals now to support our teaching and scholarship, which creates its own economic hardship, because if we're putting more and more of our money into the subscription budget and subscriptions are continuing to raise, we're constantly having to cut in that area. So I would say the economics of it for us, and behind here in the document, is the sense that we would not be able to purchase all the ebooks we need to support the teaching and scholarship that's happening at our institution in a way that would match the access we have through interlibrary loan and relying on other people's collections. And I don't know if that's getting it. We're not, I'd say, yeah, we're not taking money that we're saving by not purchasing print. I mean, we'd like to purchase more print books for the collection. We'd like to purchase more electronic books as well, but that's happening a little more slowly because of some of the advocacy efforts. Yep.
Yes.
I'm Rebecca Reinhardt. I'm with American Psychiatric Publishing. We publish textbooks. And I'm wondering if you have, how you handle adoption books at your institutions from the librarian market. Because we're finding that students will prefer to use online resources, but that means a lot of books aren't being sold. And your first point of no limits or additional costs, related to the number of times an ebook can be accessed, is really adding to that issue, because with the site license, the number of users would go into the cost. So we're really kind of torn here, because a lot of our books are adoption books. And how do you handle adoption books?
So can you define adoption books for me?
Books that are adopted for a class.
Okay.
The student is recommended to buy for a class.
Right.
As a textbook.
So I'll speak a little bit to that first bullet point, and I don't think it says it in that one specifically, but kind of in some of the verbiage around this document on our website, it talks about how the things that we're advocating for, we're willing to pay a fair price for. So for example, in this one, the reason we put it on there is partially for kind of any unanticipated budgetary requirements that might come up that we hadn't anticipated. If we're saying we'll purchase access to this book for, I'm just going to make up a number, 12 accesses, and after that we'll be charged again, and being charged and not being able to necessarily anticipate that, we'd rather pay upfront a larger percentage on the price of the title and then be able to predict and know that money's spent. We won't have to be continuing to pay for it moving forward into the future. Other libraries might have other feelings about that kind of model. We do have some books, like one of our Oxford reference titles, it's a music history volume, was used as a class textbook. We have multiple unlimited users, and the professor was going to ask the students in the class to purchase, it's a several volume set and costs several $100s, and for students too, I mean, they have that financial pressure on them. College is not a cheap thing, and buying books is not a cheap thing, but we too understand that publishers of those products need to have a profit, need to be able to further invest and create more content and spread that content out to different customers. And so I'm not an expert on building business models, but we'd like to have conversations about finding what is that price point in that example where there's a book that might have simultaneous unlimited users, where we pay up front for the cost to do that and then not have to have unexpected costs, maybe ongoing throughout the year, or if it's a textbook used from year to year. And other library.
I just want to make sure Katie doesn't have to talk like the whole time. So real quick, I'm just going to throw Kathy and Whitney under the bus, because you're talking to so many publishers. What are you hearing from your publishers about including textbooks or not, or what are their concerns?
I can take this one first. So we see a definite trend in ProQuest where our publishing partners will monitor the usage of a book. As soon as they see it getting used as an adopted material, they'll pull it. They'll pull it out of our offering. So we can't offer it to libraries as soon as it's being seen as adopted material. And you'll see the usage spike immediately. Typically, simultaneous usage of our books is 5% or less, and all of a sudden, simultaneous usage of our books will jump up to 60% on that one book. It's very obvious when a book is starting to be used that way. If it's a frontlist title, like I said, they'll pull it. We did pilot a model about a year ago on EBL, which was a reserve model. And that reserve model allowed a librarian to select that, a professor to let the librarian know, I'm going to use this book as a course material. And the librarian could put that on reserve, and so the book could be used for an hour at a time by a limited set of users, or they could choose the time period up to, like, I don't know, it was 4 hours or something. The pilot worked well for the library standpoint. They really they really liked that model, and it worked well. It wasn't perfect, but it worked well. Although from a financial standpoint, it didn't work so well for us. So we paused the pilot, and we're still exploring other ways to make this work. There's new models coming into the market that are helping. I know you're the moderator, Heather, but SIPCs, where a professor can actually go and find material and clear rights to that material to use it in a course. That's one model that's starting to come in to get those materials that may be in the library into the classroom, instead of just kind of stuck in the library and not allowed to be used for course adoption. We are toying around with other pilots in the future, like bookstore in the library, but that's usually not well received in an academic library environment. But we do, as an aggregator, we want to push forward into this area and be able to support the course adopted materials models as well as the library models. So that's the background there right now, but we're a little bit limited until we can develop some new business models, which isn't the fastest thing to do. It's fairly expensive, and we have to pilot it at first, try it out with some libraries, and then get publisher acceptance of it. And once we find something that works, we want to build for it. We want to support this. There's an in-between space here in the market where you may not be providing your books through aggregators like CourseSmart or VitalSource, but you may have more library-focused materials, but there's a space in between that's not the traditional textbook, but is being used for course adoption, and that's the space that we want to try to meet. So I haven't seen a solution yet that solves it, but I can say that we're all trying to work toward it, and I think, are you kind of in the same boat right now?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Kathy said it, very well here, and I would simply add that, this first bullet point, I certainly understand the library's perspective in it, in the sense that having the the diminishing credit model at times can be, confusing if they need to spend more and aren't prepared for it in light of the fact that their budgets are shrinking. Having been with my library as long as I have, when we started, ebooks were such a small portion of a publisher's revenue stream that there was so much that we could do in the market that was just generally accepted because it was a kind of a rounding error on the balance sheet. And now, as things grow and as it becomes more important to publishers, we understand that that it's drawing more scrutiny, which it should, in order to make sure that it's a profitable venture. But at the same time, the libraries have dealt with print models for as long as they have, and the adoption of changes things and is viewed as being a bit more flexible. However, we're still kind of in a print-first mentality at times with the acquisition, decisions that are being made. So it's evolving, and as Kathy said, developing new business models. I can dream them up, sometimes nightly, it seems, but generally not very good. It takes some time to build upon the really great ideas, and just being able to have the time and the maturity of the market in order to find the ones that are reasonable, that meet the goals, and can be adopted across the industry is very important.
I want to make sure we move on to the next slide, but I know Maura Springer has maybe a little different philosophy about course titles. You want to just address that before we move to the next?
So Springer's overall ebook model is that we bundle everything into collections by the subject area. So we have 13 subject areas. For example, mathematics and statistics would be one subject collection. Biomedical and life sciences would be another collection. Inside of that collection, we put everything. So that's textbooks, it's reference works, it's book series, it's monographs. Doesn't matter what the type of content is, it just goes into that one collection along the subject lines. That can sometimes be frustrating because let's say you just want one title, but the advantage to that is it allows you to use any material for course adoption. It's not an issue if usage spikes on a book. We're like, oh, nice, there's no yanking involved. So it's almost like a larger scale version of you pay a little bit more for this whole bundle of stuff, but what you get in return is just unlimited use for it. This has been coming up in conversations with schools and libraries all the time lately. This is such a huge trend for. I think it's getting noticed by sort of maybe more by governments and by the institution rather than just the library itself as a way to help students. So. This is great for me, right? Because it's a good conversation to be able to have. Is of course, yeah, use all of our content for course adoption. We're happy to do so. It's not going to change the price. It's not going to anything like that.
So I just, I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm sorry. I'm Heather Staines, and as Kathy mentioned, I'm with a little startup called SIPX, which during the time between we put this panel together, it seemed like the overall trend was that ProQuest is just sucking us all together. So we asked Maura to help us out. But the reason that I had a personal interest in this topic is that one of the SIPX integrates with learning management systems and e-reserves and online bookstores that professors are using to select material, and we pull in the holdings information from the school so that the professor can see in one platform what they can use. And the journal models are so standard, it's really easy to recognize a journal subscription. So of course, what do the libraries want to talk about? Can you guys recognize an ebook subscription, which of course is much messier. So I jumped at the chance to put this together because it's something that I definitely want to learn about. So our next broad area within the document is sharing of materials. Maura, you said they can do anything with the titles. Does that include sharing between libraries?
Thank you. That was a softball, if anybody didn't get that. So Springer, another unique fact about Springer is that we allow for ILL of the ebooks. We've participated in a pretty popular pilot right now called Occam's Reader with a consortium called Gwilla, which actually provides the platform for for the ILL of ebooks. Yeah, I mean, you can probably talk better than I can about the value of ILL to a library, but I know that it's always appreciated.
Yeah,
So.
I do have a question. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how that pilot is going, about what's happening with it?
So it concludes at the end of this month.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like some preliminary usage stats, and it looks like it's getting a ton of use. Like chapters and books are being ILL'd between institutions, and we haven't even begun to do assessment of it, but I think internally it's like, oh yeah, this is working. This seems to make sense. So, and we've kind of stuck our heads out saying ILL is something that we support. So, you know, if you support something, you should support it. So, yeah.
Maura, is there anything that happens during the time that the chapter is loaned? Like, does the original school lose access or anything? I mean, I should know this, but
I don't know the details of exactly how it worked out. I know that it did. It's not a super fancy PDF like you would get from the platform. I think it's a bare bones content presentation. I don't know. Any of the librarians here, are you part of this pilot? Yeah, I'm sorry. I could make up details, but I'm not exactly sure. But yeah.
I will say there's one platform, Publishers Row platform. We purchased some content from them with some endowed funds that we had. We haven't actually tried this out yet, but there is a method where we can grab a serial number, some kind of a number that we send along with a link to the title, and a designated time that number will work basically for accessing the book. And then, again, we haven't tested this yet. When we do that and send it out to an institution, our campus would not have access to that book. So it's very similar to a print book being lent out to another institution. If a print book's lent, we wouldn't have that book for our patrons. So we still, again, we just acquired some of that content, and we'll be testing that out just to see how it works. But I could see that being a model. Maybe it would be one that's more comfortable for publishers to know that it's not someone just sending off a PDF for the other library to have for eternity, that there is kind of that cutoff point for the institution and only one library being lent that item at a time.
Okay. Anybody have questions that concern sharing? This is the shortest of the 3 slides. So let me go ahead and jump on to what we thought we'd probably have to spend the bulk of the conversation about, and we can loop back then to any overview issues, which is, what are you paying for when you get an ebook and an ebook collection and things like that? Are you working at all with any models that include ownership and perpetual access, or could you guys talk a little bit about that within the platforms?
We do it with the ProQuest platforms. We offer perpetual access for as many books as our publishers will allow us to. So, and on EBL, that means all the books are available for perpetual access purchase. On eBrary, some are limited, but most everything is available for perpetual access. We offer a single user license to a book that a library can purchase. That's typically at list price. A 3-user license, which is typically at about 125% of list. Multi-user license, which can be anywhere from 150% of list, and that's an unlimited license. We see publishers usually choosing unlimited licenses for backlist titles. Frontlist titles are typically put into, single user or 3-user initially. EBL offers also a creative model that's called Nonlinear Lending, and we will be maintaining it in our new product. That's where a library has perpetual access, but they buy the title for a little bit more than list price, and they get 320 uses over the course of a year. And of that 320 uses, each use is 24 hours. They can use, a patron can take out a 7-day loan. The library controls the loan period. They can take out a 7-day loan and they use 7 of those uses. They can take out a 10-day loan and use 10 of them. 10 users can use 1-day loan at the same time. So it's this kind of decrementing model, and that 320 uses resets annually. On that one, just another data point, we only see 2% of libraries hitting the limit every year. That's it. But when they hit that limit, they have the option of doing a short-term loan or buying another copy. But we do provide all of these perpetual models. I know my library does dark archive services. We're about to start offering that too on our platforms. So a lot of these bullets are covered on this slide from our aggregator offerings. And I think the other thing to note is we probably spend, I would say, 50% of our development money and effort providing features that allow librarians to control access periods, loan periods. So they may buy the title, and building that catalog is very important for libraries to be able to select the title, but there's this whole area of ownership and management now after the title's sold that we haven't had to address in the print world. So it's this new area of both spend and opportunity for us as publishers and aggregators, where we can provide services in this area to help make librarians' lives easier to manage this ebook collection. So we do offer the perpetual ownership, and it has limits in some cases, and all of these functions to control loan periods, to mediate loans, to buy up more loans, to prevent turnaways. So all of that's available on the platform. It's very expensive to build, but we believe it's worth it to support the libraries. We'll try to remove as many limits as possible. And printing and downloading, again, those limits are all flexible. So if a publisher allows us to open the whole book up for printing, we will. And open the whole book up for downloading, we will.
So I would maintain that it's not ownership. It might be perpetual access, but we certainly don't own the book. We can't do what we want with it the way we could. And I think it's a misnomer to call it ownership.
That's fair. It's what's interesting, what's different about it is that we have to help you do whatever you want with it. And like, let's look at ILL as an example. If I don't enable that functionality, if we can't build that functionality for you, you're right. You can't do what you want with it. We do have the options. All of our contract provisions, we have the ability to provide every library with a PDF. But you're in a different, that's a little different. It's not like having a book on the shelf. So our goal is to meet these tenets here. But yeah, that's true. It's a different situation with an ebook. Yeah.
Well, and I would say that as far as your comment regarding ownership, I think you're correct. In fact, I've been training myself over the past several years to stop saying ownership and more referring to it as a license. I think that as a general rule, we as aggregators could work, well, let me be careful with how I say this, because the idea is that, you know, we're dealing with the print world in some ways. You know, again, I said it before, but, you know, we have all these print notions, you know, how a book should be lended, how it can be accessed, how it can be repurposed, and so on and so forth. And then we have this ebook solution. And we caution our libraries to treat this as you would a print title, in the sense that, you know, you would have the ability, if a license is checked out, you don't get an unlimited amount if you've only purchased a single user license. But at the same time, we stop short and don't allow for, you know, certain things such as ILL to take place, because it is an electronic resource. And so, you know, it's working to develop what that means really to have an e-resource. It's not really a print resource. And to try to remove ourselves and divorce ourselves of, you know, treating it all in the same way. But again, I think that comes with that maturation of the industry in general, you know, trying to wrap our brains collectively around what that means and in assisting. As for the dark archive, we, as for my library, we do support that. We have an agreement so that, you know, if something were to happen to our platform where content is no longer accessible, you know, you can find it you know, through this other vendor. We aren't permitted in our contracts to hand out PDFs of the content, and the reason, of course, being is that, you know, it's both a technological issue. Simply having the PDF doesn't mean you have the ability to render it online or to circulate it. So there's that issue, but it's also respecting the publisher's, you know, need to control the distribution of that content. You know, obviously, if a title were to get out into the market and be available online readily, that limits, obviously, that publisher's ability to make money off that title. And we need the publishers to make money because we need to have those good titles coming in. And so having an archive is our, you know, in-between point between being able to provide, you know, a local hosted, you know, access, as well as, you know, not being tied solely to the My Library product, you know, in the event that something were to happen to the system or you wanted to move on to another vendor.
There was another question? Yes?
Actually, it's a comment.
Comment.
Susan Stearns on the Boston Library Consortium. Since today, most ebooks really are surrogates for print, one of the things I'd like to see more of is this ownership idea combining print and ebooks. There have been some publishers that have put forth models where if you purchase, and this can be more easily done at a collective level through a consortium, for example, than necessarily by an individual library, where the consortium purchases whatever license to the ebook, and also they receive a physical print copy that then both allows them to share it through interlibrary loan and gives them real ownership of the content itself. As ebooks evolve to being really very different kind of digital documents, I think we're going to have to come up with other ways to approach this. But today, I'm kind of surprised that we haven't done more of combining those models.
Springer offers that actually. We have this service through Ingram, through Lightning Source. We call it My Copy, but pretty much after a library purchases a collection of ebooks, they can order a print copy, although it is for the individual, not for the institution, so that might be different from what you're saying. But, I mean, the technology is there for sure, and yeah. Well, actually, I mean, it's funny that you say that, right? Because when this slide first showed up, every time I've come to this slide, when I'm having this discussion, whether in prep sessions or actually here, it's amazing how closely tied the ownership issue is to the tech issue. I mean, even listening to Kathy say, you guys are built for subscriptions and managing the number of users, and your difficulty is doing the tech development to get to ownership. And at Springer, we have the completely opposite, which is we built our platform for ownership, and then somebody comes to me and says, hey, can we get less ownership? And I'm like, yes, let's spend lots of development money giving you less ownership. You know?
Help with that.
Yeah. It's like a conundrum that we face a lot. But it's totally tied up with the tech issue of, like, you know, any change that you have to your platform comes with costs, and then sort of figuring out whether doing that development before knowing whether the cost is worthwhile or not, and what is the value of it to a library. I know that wasn't your point. I understand it, but it is curious to me how close ownership and technology seem to be tied. And,
Well,
I guess, and budget makes it a trifecta.
Yeah,
right?
and the tech in the e-textbook market, they have been doing this for 5 years at least. When you buy an e-textbook, many of the publishers would provide a print textbook with the ebook online for free, especially because these ebooks at this point aren't including all of the media that will come in the future, videos, you know, all of the multimedia. So when it's just a copy of the print book, many of the textbook publishers already do this. And some of the aggregators...
I think they limit how long that online version is tied to the course, right? So it's not like you have an online...
It depends. Cengage was doing it 8 years ago by sticking a CD in the back of the book, you know? And so now we've moved on from that, and I think many of the aggregators are limiting some of that access. So kind of varies at this point. I think I'll put a little plug in. Now that we have purchased Oasis and Coots, we probably have opportunities. I think in the past, some of the barriers have been that we were these co-opetition companies, you know, that we weren't doing the bundles together yet between the P&E. And I think we have an opportunity now with some of the shifts that are happening in the market to start pursuing some of these creative ideas around print and e together.
October? Speak up just a little bit, October.
The three principles we're exploring for ebooks directly match up to yours, but they're sketchier, so yours are better. That's why I already put my yours. It's the provision of irrevocable perpetual access and archival rights, unlimited simultaneous users, freedom from DRM, meaning no proprietary formats, no restricted access, no time limit.
Fantastic.
Very handy, having a sharper base rather than a much bigger speed. Be happy to answer any questions about it, and I really want to get contact information for all of you.
For the publishers who are just feel like they're early days in ebooks, my head just started spinning when Kathy was talking about all the options. So I would imagine that it can seem a little bit overwhelming. I mean, how are your internal discussions going, you know, in either exploratory or sort of early launch phase with either an aggregated or direct model? Anybody comment from?
Well, my name is Sarah Jane. I'm from the American Theological Society, and we have a large journals program which is very separate from what we're doing with books, and we're just exploring now. We did actually sign on with Springer up through 2012. We call it our legacy content now. It's all available on Springer Link. That turned out to be a horrible idea for our one text because we generally stay away from textbooks, so we were pretty confident about the relationship. That textbook stood to be not just a moneymaker for us. We're a nonprofit organization. We needed to recoup our investment. Springer allowed us to pull it, to yank it. And moving forward, we are on our own online bookstore, and through our print distributor, University of Chicago Press, and they're going to be using Bibliovault to deliver our ebook files for the next 2 months to various vendors. We're going to evaluate our print sales for the first 3 months of every title, frontlist title, and if it looks like it's being adopted, we're not going to include it for us, and so on and so forth. And that's really the only thing we can do at the moment. And I felt crestfallen when I was listening to you talk, because you were talking about how you understand that publishers need to continue to develop content and make money and all this. We were just trying to recoup our investments on the things that we are publishing. So I hear that you all feel our pain. I don't hear any solutions yet, but my ears are open, and I look forward to see where all this goes.
Great. So, as being part of Ingram, we offer a product called CoreSource, which University of Chicago Press and Bibliovault are a party to. And that product is a digital asset management, digital repository management solution. And what it will do is, and forgive me, I shouldn't go into many details. I work with it on the very periphery, so I'm sure they are not inclined for me to be their complete spokesperson here. But
you're here.
I am here. And so what it will do is it will help normalize the distribution to all of the different product lines. So each from a retail market to a library market perspective. And what that can mean for publishers is that instead of having to learn how all of the different channel partners take in the content and adapting to their needs from metadata, from file management, and so on and so forth, CoreSource does that for you directly, so that you supply the data to them one time, and then they turn around and configure it to meet all of the different needs of the market. So I believe that can help with the publishers as far as an investment strategy. The fact that you can deliver it to one central location doesn't mean that you have to invest, or it means that you don't have to invest in adopting to the ProQuest, way of taking in content, to the My Library way, then going out to the retail establishments, and can help you get to a broader audience of distribution partners as well. Of course, it's a fee-based product, so there is that piece to consider as far as an investment, but it does give you a solution to getting out and maximizing your overall investment, so that you're not taking it in to try to get to all of the different retailers and libraries or aggregators independently.
I think the challenge when you have to pull a book like that, because you're worried it might hurt the print sales, there is a huge value in having people use the book, because you start to see as a publisher what content's getting used, what you can build on with the next edition, what you can build on in the future, and how the researchers are using it. So we don't have a solution yet, but we need to find ways to get that value back to you, because frankly, as a publisher, you may be saying, well, I'll take a little bit of a hit in my sales if I can get the usage data out and I can understand how this book and the content's being used and use that to guide my next edition and help grow future sales. But we have to bridge that gap right now. We haven't done it yet in the market, and I'm sure Maura would agree with me that in the end, I think the usage data is going to be so valuable to us in guiding what we provide to the market and to our customers and our researchers that the benefit will end up outweighing this hit we take initially to make the leap. But I agree with you, we're not quite there yet, and we're looking at ways to get there, but it takes time. And the unfortunate part is we may have focused a little bit more as aggregators on replicating print models to get into the libraries, rather than looking ahead to these future models where we say, what value is this new data going to bring us? Because it's there. We're seeing it now. And if we can get that back to our publishers to help grow the market in general, that's where we want to be. So
Katie's chomping at the bit to get in on it.
Yeah, something came, going back to the question, I think, about the economics of things and our budget. And now I can't remember the name of the project, but it relates to the funding of creation of the books to start with. And
Knowledge Unlatched?
Yep, Knowledge Unlatched. So we supported Knowledge Unlatched, which put funds forward to help kind of unlock books so that they could be accessible to people more economically. And so thinking a little bit maybe in that direction about different ways for funding the creation of the content, or paying for, was it the copyright or something that frees those materials up to be more accessible to people, is something, and I can't remember all the details, but that's something that we've been looking at, and when opportunities come up to fund those types of projects, we do try to put money towards those projects.
Have people heard about Knowledge Unlatched? Is that? Okay. Oh, at this.
Oh.
That's always the way that it goes. Yeah. Well.
Couldn't you just get a bigger budget?
Right, exactly. Go to the VP for
Yes.
finance.
So a follow-on similar to the other one. So the underlying issue of ownership, simply the fact that because you paid for something, you should own it, or is there something else going on there? Because if I imagine this, there's also open books.
Mm-hmm.
Open source. So in those cases, when you look at an open textbook or an open book, do you care about ownership there? I mean, what's your ownership in that?
Right. I mean,
That's a good question.
yeah, that is a really good question, and I'm just kind of mulling that through in my brain. I mean, for us, the ownership piece has a lot to do with like the right of first sale and the ability to lend and share the content. Most open access books, for the most part, or open access content is open to everyone in the world, basically, and so we don't need to advocate for that particular item for those titles. So for us,
Do you care about the archive?
dark,
Or you
yeah,
care about archiving those? I mean,
yeah, that's a good
you're archiving
question.
books because you buy them and you feel like you have to put them in a vault. But
Mhm.
when it's an open book, are you caring about archiving? Will you archive it? How does it
Right.
change things?
That's a good question.
The Charlotte group definitely wants to archive anything that they're using. They're looking at promoting the use of content effectively, and faculty feel secure that it's going to be there the next time they assign it. And whatever source it comes from, ultimately, they want to be able to put it on their own platform. Ultimately, I know that we'll get there.
So it's not about, I think the underlying issue is not about, like, holding a car or
Here's where I feel like I have to give a plug for digital preservation, which when I was at Springer, that's one of the things that I did. And when it comes to who's responsible for preserving and archiving the open access, I think is much more of a kind of lackadaisical, oh, somebody will have it. It's even more critical, I think, because it is open, and a lot of the things that the publishers do for their proprietary content make sure that the open access content and publishers that you're talking to have that in there. You know, you're not doing a license with them, but have that as part of their philosophy, because it's even more critical. So that's my digital preservation announcement. There was another question. I'm sorry, I stepped on it. Yes.
To do with the economics. So, I don't remember exactly. Yeah. So you were talking about you at the journal side of the house and you got the eBook side. So I just think it's so important to understand that our libraries are just eaten up with journal prices. I have very little left at the end of the year to spend on books at all. And if not for PDA, right now, our users would basically have very little access to books of any kind. And I just wonder, do you have those conversations with the journal side of the house? Why do journals have to go 6% from the rest? You know, inflation does not, why is that? And it might be hurting your book side of the house. Do you have those conversations? That's the reality of our budgets. We just, and as you said, our users really want journals a lot more than the books.
We certainly understand that, and we work really closely with, so for membership driven through your own they're very interested in our contact, and they're very the needle story and so we know very much that's a concern, and we're just starting.
No, that's good. That's good. We encourage it.
Yes.
I'm in charge of our books and our journal program for the American Psychiatric Association, and I have those conversations every day. And there are economic issues on both sides. In the journal area, you're being faced with fairly high hosting costs, e-hosting costs, and ongoing building of the infrastructure to support that whole program. And there's also an erosion of advertising, which used to be at one point quite a big revenue stream for journals that frankly no longer exists. And on the book side, I had the same experience as you did. I pulled all of our books from aggregators. They were causing us a terrible hit in print sales, adoption sales, and it was just economically untenable. So I'm in the same situation. And that's where it comes from.
So I'm in the same situation.
Sorry, can you say your affiliation again?
The Mathematical Association of America. So we have a very small staff, and not good marketing. So to use an aggregator is like outsourcing. So what was your experience?
We were just losing a major amount of money. The journals were not, and the revenue was taking a big hit. So
What do you have staff?
backlist opportunities with aggregators, I think, are probably significant on ebooks, because those books are now out of your, they're not in your immediate focus area. So if you've older books, it seems like a slam dunk often, because we can monetize those for you. But yeah, the same frontlist challenges that you're echoing, we don't have solved yet. So, and we try things, but they may backfire on us sometimes, so we have to pull back on some models and push forward on others. So, yeah.
I just wanted to just quickly, DDA was mentioned, and because that's actually part of the title of the session, I want to make sure that it gets enough attention. I mean, for the publishers in the room, are you participating in DDA initiatives? And the librarian, I know there's, the publishers worry something might not be used if it's in a DDA program, and then the librarians worry that too much is going to be used, and there's a tension there. But what are your current concerns or topics in DDA? Oh, who wants to say DDA?
DDA stands for demand-driven acquisition, and what we do on our platforms, we monitor how much a book is getting used, and if it hits certain trigger points, we then trigger a purchase based on the library's settings. So it may be after 5 minutes of use, a single user title is purchased, or maybe that library chooses to purchase by default a multi-user title. It may be that they trigger a loan. So it's often based on minutes of use, whether the end user downloads, copies, or prints. And for some platforms, page flips also comes into it. So if they flip enough pages or access enough chapters that aren't front matter or back matter, then a purchase will get triggered. So it's all purchases are based on usage. And so what we're seeing is libraries combining these programs with they may have an approval plan where they have traditionally used to purchase print books. They may be buying books just directly as firm orders through our catalog, or they may also put on top of that a DDA plan, so that any books that they may not proactively purchase, if they get used enough, it will trigger a purchase and the library will have a copy of them.
And we found that the DDA, my library refers to it as PDA because we're big fans of multiple acronyms, which is patron-driven acquisition. We have found that it has been a real benefit, though, to the libraries. I mean, of course, because with the shrinking budgets that they see, they can't afford to spend money speculatively, right? In the anticipation that a title will get used somewhere down the line eventually. This at least ensures that the titles that are being purchased are actually seeing the usage. So understanding that the backlist content is primed for this type of discovery. We also find that librarians at times still want to hold on to a lot of that that acquisition, only allowing DDA for very limited use to begin with. So being careful to not paint it with such a broad strokes that, the libraries still have they still elect to use it only in limited circumstances. Via My Library and Coots, we can limit it to subject listings, to years, to publishers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It need not be a one-size-fits-all type arrangement for the libraries, so that any title that comes through immediately gets thrown in. They actually don't want that generally.
Right. Well, and it was originally designed for that.
Mm-hmm.
It was designed to supplement your existing collection development program, where you had a vacancy in a particular subject selector area or something. So you could shift that over to DDA or PDA during the period of vacancy. But so many librarians have made such a big deal about, oh, we slashed our monograph spending by 90% in doing this. People are jumping on that bandwagon without really thinking through the impact on the system. And, sort of a countervailing trend that we're starting to see at the last, at ACRL in March, at the Charleston conference in November, there were presentations by libraries that were sort of early purchasers of the entire Duke ebooks, the entire JSTOR ebooks, the entire Project Use, actually not JSTOR, it's not unlimited use, but the ones that are unlimited use, they're seeing 60% release within 3 years. And this is back file, front file. So if you make things available to people in a usable form with a good search engine and good metadata, these collections are getting used. So, allowing subscriptions to kind of crowd out books when books are at the early stages of, they're not with discovery tools, the metadata isn't good, it's a problem.
There was a question on this side.
My name's Kimberly Rosenfield. I work for the American Bar Association in publishing. I'm interested if you found if there's a trend in the type of industry for PDAs more adopted, more accessible, more adopted more often. Because for us, for ABA publishing, we work sort of in a strange amalgamation with the libraries we send our books to. We send to university libraries, but we also have a law library, so law firms have their own libraries. And we found that universities and the law libraries at the universities we have a package plan, and every single book we publish, they put in their library. But we find universities, they want full-on package plan. They want all of our titles, while the law firms want a more accessible, pick and choose sort of the DDA, where they want to find books that their partners and their associates are using more often, and finding books that work better for their firm than, let's say, the university. So I'm interested because in the DDA, what industries are adopted more often, because for us, we found that we've lost a lot of package plan law library subscriptions to the ABA, because a lot of the law firms are finding the way we do the catch-all subscriptions to be outdated and
I have very limited input on this. Our market is generally academic libraries. Such a small portion represent a professional aspect that we don't have any usable trends or data to really answer that sufficiently.
It's the same for us. I've rarely seen what we call our corporate customers pick up DDA programs. Typically, they are buying book by book, or they're buying a subscription package. I've rarely seen them pick up DDA programs, mostly because all of the administrative tools that go along with the DDA program typically are focused on libraries. So it's a little hard for a corporate customer or a business customer to get in there and use those tools when they're really focused on loan periods and a lot of the things, mark records, a lot of the things that are unique to academic libraries. We do a lot of research on which subjects trigger more in DDA, where strangely enough, well, I don't know if it's strange or not, but STEM is less, they trigger less than more liberal arts, soft sciences, all that triggers much, much more in DDA. But that's different than what you're asking, yeah. And so I just don't have enough information on that, yeah.
That's right. And I think we've generally found that when we have the corporate customers who come in, they know very much what they're looking for. Yeah. They're very, it's not to say that, of course, the academic libraries don't know what they're looking for, but they come in looking for a very specific title or set of titles, and that's it, end of story, and the transaction is generally done.
I think we have time for, I see two people. We have time for two questions, but let's keep them short because lunch is coming. In the front first, and then we'll in the back.
That's going through, which causes a tremendous amount of cost to the whole process. And trying to figure out ways to solve some of those costs, I think it's a struggle right now for a lot of us.
Rita had a question, and then you'll just have to come up afterwards.
Are you thinking specifically of marketing into different industries like law firms, or are you asking specifically about marketing within the academic market already?
Academic or largely within academic, but it doesn't matter. As long as you prove your usage for a title would be
right.
Is there experience with that? Is there a connection with specifically marketing for bringing up that use?
So I think you're right. Metadata and discoverability is one big piece of this. If the researchers don't find the content, they don't use the content. We've toyed around with doing things like Amazon recommendations, you might also like, right? But thinking about where that fits within a research market, and also many libraries do not want us to do that kind of advertising on site, right? Because we may be increasing their spend quickly, rapidly increasing their spend. So there's a little bit of a balance between helping the researcher find more content that's relevant to them and makes their research experience richer and improved versus just pushing for money, which we don't want to do necessarily. So I think right now we are putting a strong focus in our world on the metadata, the discoverability, and we put a lot of effort there into making that happen. Although I wouldn't be surprised if you do see some things coming up in the future to help researchers find more content. But I think when you talk about marketing for PDA, what you're really trying to do is get the researcher to click more and use more and read more and access more books and access more chapters. So I think there's a fine line there between doing it with the goal of improving research and then going overboard and doing too much marketing. So right now we're focused on discovery and kind of, exploring some other areas.
Complicated, right?
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and particularly for participating. I'd just like to have a hand for the panelists.